Move to our next topic. In fact, next topic was actually supposed to be the main topic. Jesus, are we supposed to take a break? Okay. All right. So let's now go to our next topic, for which Professor Kobe Mensah has patiently been waiting to comment on. And once again, would apologize sincerely and profusely to Professor Kobe Mensah. We made him to wake up at 8 o'clock, and he's been hanging in there for almost an hour. Prof, we're so sorry once again. Now, it's about the MPP's Delegates Conference. So it's over. We now know we now know the first five. Initially, the fifth person was hanging in the balance, and so there was supposed to be a runoff. But there have been some development. Boache Jakun has written to the party saying that the party has acted unconstitutionally, so he's not interested. He doesn't want to participate. The party has written back to him to say, we acknowledge receipt of your statement. We acknowledge the fact that you say you don't want to participate, so there won't be any, how do you call it? There won't be any super delegates as part two, super delegates conference part two to be able to break the tie. So we have the fifth person. So for now, it's the Vice President, Dr. Alhaji Mahmoud Bamia, who topped 68%, and then we have Mr. Kennedy Japan, who's actually the surprise, the surprise element in these elections, as some election watchers and observers will tell you. He pulled about some 14%, and then we have Mr. Alan Chairman who put about some 10%, and the rest had 8%, and so on and so on. So we have the first five. Boache Jakun is the fifth person. So, but the results are out. But what do we make? What meaning do we make out of what has happened with this Superdelegates conference? We just look at the numbers and say, well, that is what is going to reflect on the 4th of November, or it means much more than that. So what are the nuances? What sort of analysis must go into the outcome of the Superdelegates conference? So, Abdallah, if you're ready with the results, please display them quickly, and then so that we can go to Professor Kobe Mensah in just a minute. Good. So here we go. So Kennedy Japan had polled 132 votes. Alan Chamantin polled 95. Joe Gate polled 4. Kwejo Poku had 3. Dr. Ose Free had 36. Dr. Mahmoud Bamia had 629. Boache Jakun had 9. Dr. Kofi Konedu had 0. Francis Adai Nemo had 9. Kwabena Eje Japan had 6. So out of this, we now have Kennedy Japan, Alan Kodo Chairman Ting, Dr. Owuse Free Yakoto, Dr. Mahmoud Bamia, and Kennedy Ohene Japan. So these are the 5 who, and then also Mr. Dynamo, yes, the former Mampong MP. Now, let me start with Professor Kobe Mensah, who has some very interesting analysis and views on the Superdelegates Conference. Prof, first, once again, I'm going to be apologizing for the umpteenth time because I can appreciate the inconvenience I've had to put you through. So, really, what are your general thoughts? I mean, when you heard the results, when the results started trickling in, and finally we got to know there was 6 persons, we had to break a tie, and so on and so forth. What were the things that were going through your mind?
Thank you, Moro, and let me say hi to Seth and Benjamin. Seth, it's been a while. I haven't been in touch. Yeah. Obviously, I have said hi to Kofi before. Benjamin, he's making money at Central University, so he knows when he doesn't come. You come around because I'm making money.
I'll come over for some dollars, perhaps.
Yeah, he's making some dollars, so he has forgotten about it.
But he doesn't have it. He doesn't have
Prof
it.
is a brother.
He's a brother. Oh, okay, okay, you're related.
I'm an early bird. I woke up earlier.
Right.
Last night, because of university student stuff, I slept late.
Okay.
But of course, I had to wake up early because he said you had 8 o'clock.
That's true.
Anyway, but it's fine. Yeah, thank you. Well, firstly, let me say that in terms of democracy, especially those who look at a procedural democracy, you realize that there are certain arrangements that we do in order to be or predetermine or to influence the processes involved in elections. You do not want to give people a head start, etc. So when you look at the systems that we put in place in democracy, they are deliberately calibrated in such a way that it gives fairness, it gives transparency, so that people would have confidence in the process. So when you cast your mind back, I'm sure myself and Seth, Benjamin is a young man, Kofi is a young man. So when you look at when we started democracy in 1992, we had an opaque ballot boxes. That over the period had been changed to a much more transparent one. We didn't have pictures of candidates. We had only the political parties' emblems and symbols. We changed them. Over the period, we had made changes. Currently, we're talking about biometric, voting or registration, etc. All these are attempts that we have deliberately made in order that the voters and all the stakeholders involved in elections would have confidence in the system. Now, by these measures that I've actually talked about, let's then use that particular framework of transparency and fairness to actually evaluate the what we call the super delegate elections that actually happened. Now, you realize that in the MPP's constitution, which I'm very familiar because obviously that's my PhD work, I have actually been, I always tell people that, look, if you ask me, I can give you MPP's blueprint at a go because I've actually studied it, on a number of occasions. Now, when you look at the clauses in that particular provision, which actually gave rise to after the 2007 elections, by the way, the 2007, 17 people that actually contested that particular election, it isn't that people raised concerns and were annoyed because there were plenty of people actually contesting. Actually, that is the essence of democracy. You want a higher participation. And so when you go to countries where their turnout is about 34%, they get worried about it because people don't care about their elections. In our case, I don't know whether it's by design or by passion, we always look forward to elections. So when you have 17 people wanting to become presidential candidate, I don't think there's something wrong with it. What was wrong, however, that actually raised the tensions and then the anxieties of Ghanaians were that most of these 17 candidates were actually government functionaries. They were ministers and who people thought that had actually used state funds to pay for their candidacy. Why? Because the money that the party was demanding at the time for candidates to pay was so huge that people couldn't believe that individuals can have by their own money to pay for that particular application forms. And so people thought that it was government money, state money that they were using to actually pay for their candidacy. So that raised a lot of concerns and people were angry at it. Now, when the MPP leadership met and then sought to address that particular concern so that it does not happen again, they instituted what we call the super delegate process. I personally think that super delegate process perhaps could have been thought differently because they could have used certain administrative mechanisms to prune down if that was the case. But I didn't even think that it was necessary to prune down if indeed people are voluntarily coming to, present themselves as candidates and they're using their own funds. Remember, I said that people thought the funds that they were using in 2007 was state funds. That's why they were angry. All right. Now, if you look at the superdelegate structure that were used, you are voting in a particular period, and then the next 2 or 3 months, the other delegates actually vote. When you do that, and then you put the numbers out, essentially what you're doing is that you're giving somebody a head start. And I told you about procedural democracy arrangement that we do in order not to bias or in order not to influence others, voting intentions, for example. Now, so you do a superdelegate conference, elections, and then you put numbers out, who is first, who is second, who is third. Essentially what you have done is that you have prejudiced the process in November. You had told the people that someone is being favored by a certain higher level delegate. And don't forget, in our society that we're in, there is something called a theory called planned behavior theory. The planned behavior theory says that people are influenced by social norms, i.e., attitude that people think the society approves of. That is what they plan to do. When people think that this behavior, people do not approve of it, they don't do it. There is also a theory called social impact theory, and I'm sure my colleagues would actually appreciate some of these things I'm talking about. And for public education, social impact theory actually says that when a group of people actually do something, it has an impact on others. So you realize that in media, we have something called bandwagon. They say, everybody is going here. Why are you alone going that way? This theory has been used in our political system. In fact, in 2000 elections, Jacob Echebilamte actually told me, which when I met him, may his soul rest in peace, we were discussing the strategies that were used in MPP election. When there was supposed to be the second ballot, which, of course, the Volta region had been seen heavily tilted towards NDC, they did an ad in the press, and everybody can pull that. They said the wind of change is blowing in this direction. Why are you alone going in that direction? That advert was meant to target the voters in the Volta region and other places that had chosen NDC as their choices. Now, it has a lot of impact. So if you do a superdelegate elections and you articulate who is first, who is second, as opposed to the original idea of what we call the preference voting, where somebody would choose the first and choose second and choose third ballot, and then it's arranged in a manner that people don't see who is the first, but you depart from it and do a certain manner that it says that somebody is first. You have prejudiced the November election. So my thoughts, my reaction to you was that, one, I thought that if indeed it was a genuine but not any intention to manipulate, then of course the party hierarchy actually erred in that process. But I know that political parties, executives, elections, they do not do things just like that. Two, I thought that the processes of having regional or centers other than congregating at a particular place also actually affirm the belief of others that this was used to intimidate people, because we have seen that in the past where political parties have attempted to identify people with certain serial numbers for voting. And so it makes it difficult for people to feel safe in their particular direction that they want to vote. Now, if you take a constituency like the Northeast that had 28 over 28, I ask myself, can you possibly have a certain group of people who absolutely would think in a particular direction without any highly influence? Look, it is not possible. I mean, we are lecturers. We research in people behavior. We research in this until there is a higher level of pressure, of influence. It is not possible that you have a certain group of people who will think the same way. At least there must be a deviation. In this case, 28 over 28, ask yourself, what could have been the level of influence, intimidation, resources, etc., that would have actually gone into this for some group of people who research had shown that they had diverse choices, yet on the D-Day, you see all of them converging at the same point. I mean, these are some of the issues that we must articulate if we want to really have a very transparent, free election and credible election. We should talk about some of these things. So this is my initial, thought about this.
Fantastic, wonderful. I think that we've enjoyed the analysis. But Prof, you talked about the model, which is this first tier, second tier model that the MPP uses to select or to elect its flag bearer. Now, this is a framework that was instituted or was actually established in 2014. Are you suggesting that this was used this time round because somebody had to be given a head start, or somebody was interested in giving somebody or making somebody, how do you call it, or in favoring or giving somebody a favor? I don't know where you stand on this, because 2014 was the same, and it produced a leader for the party, or like a flag bearer for the party. It's been used this time round. My question is, What's the difference? Because you use the social impact and the the planned behavior theory to actually support the argument you're making that this was planned to give some kind of a psychological advantage to somebody. How do you explain how the fact that this same model was used in 2014?
Yeah, Mauro, thanks. The planned behavior theory wasn't on the part of the executionists. I'm talking about the part of the voters.
Yes, exactly.
Where their behavior or their attitude to do something is actually influenced by social norms.
Right.
Now, let me say that, remember that between 2014 and 2023, how many years now?
It must have been almost 9 years.
Society is dynamic, all right? And that's why I gave you instances of how our electoral processes had been refined over the years. 1992 was opaque ballot. 2000, it wasn't opaque ballot. It was transparent. Transparent, boxes, all right? Now, the interval between 92 and 2000, how many years? Almost about, is it 8 years, right?
8 years, yeah.
So it tells you that the dynamic of the time called for review, all right? So if you have instituted a process that meant that in 2014 it was useful, the question is, how useful is that process in the current dispensation? Okay. You have to look at that.
All right.
And of course, if people at the time, someone like me at the time that processes were instituted, perhaps I was young, of course, I might have actually catch up with time and then, of course, refine my thinking. And now I can see that perhaps there was something wrong with it. Are you saying that the people who met, the 9 people who met and said that this process of doing regional, things, we think that is not good enough, are you saying that they didn't see through and realize that perhaps it wasn't a group process? Perhaps in the past, if you had put that question to them in 2014, perhaps they might have agreed to say, let's do regional.
Okay.
But 2023, they think perhaps regional would not be, and then would give you reasons why they think that the regional elections would not be the good way of doing it. Okay. So we always have to review processes and refine them. When we do that, we are bettering our system. And that's why I'm saying, if people review, and knowing our political system as we do, if people review and they think that is not in their best interest, they would insist on the status quo. And so I am not saying that they probably had, seen that it will benefit them and so had used it. Okay. I am saying that they should have perhaps reviewed and consulted and perhaps thought that this process would not be good enough.
All right. So the vice president be complacent and say, I got 68%, so I can go and sleep. And should Alan Tremantin lose hope?
No, of course not. The data that I said again, the data that we have collected, all right, we always knew that the top pile of the delegates, remember the delegates are in piles, all right, the national level, you're talking about the MPs, the regional chairman, etc., all right, and then of course going down to the polling station level. The evidence is, and we've collected in a series of data. We did one, in fact, when NDC did their their elections, we did a survey and put in a question that asked them who they thought was competitive against John Mahama amongst the MPP candidate they are seeking to be flag bearer. Overwhelmingly, they chose Alan Tremantin. All right, and I know the kind of conversation that MPP people would say, oh, because they thought that Bawumia is competitive, that's why they keep choosing Alan Tremantin. So we did another survey, which we actually they put it in the daily graphic. It was in the daily graphic for people to scan and actually choose. The same question appeared: who do they think that will be competitive against Mahama and NDC? A lot of people overwhelmingly chose Alan Tremantin again. Remember, we've moved from the NDC delegates, we've moved to the country, and they chose Alan Tremantin as the most competitive against what we call NDC and former President Mahama. Then we had collected data from NPP delegates, the top, the middle, and the bottom. Majority of the top were actually tilting towards the vice president. So we knew that in the super delegate, it is likely that what we call vice president would be on top. The position of Alan was surprising because he had always come second. And then, of course, the rest of them, Kennedy, Japan, etc. But the bottom of the pyramid, that is the polling station agent, etc., majority is actually towards Alan. So it is not a done deal, I don't think, for the vice president. We're expecting that if the election is held in November, you're going to have a certain sway. But there's a caveat. And as we know, you can ask Benjamin, we always talk about moderating effect. When a process is heavily moderated by certain conditions, the result can change. I.e., we've seen a heavy use of resources. All right. So if that format, that framework is supposed to be repeated, then of course, the evidences that we've seen is not going to happen. And then again, we've seen heavy use of intimidation in the last election. If this is going to be repeated, then of course it's not going to happen. So if the NPP delegates generally feel that Alan is the most competitive against the NDC, then the natural progression will be that Alan is supposed to come on top. But I've given you the caveat. Certain moderating factors, heavy use of resources, changing people's minds, and then of course intimidation can change people's minds.
Prof, thank you so very much for your time. It's been wonderful talking to you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Prof. Kobe Mensah is a marketing strategist talking to us here on Insight Pages on what he makes of the NPP Superdelegates Conference and the aftermath and all the issues that have come up. We'll take a short break. When I come back, I'll pick the thoughts of Dr. Benjamin Ocheankra, who's here with us, Central University, Seth Ofori-Ohene with the NDC, and also Kofi Tonto, who says that he likes Bawumia. He wants Dr. Bawumia to lead the NPP into the 2024 elections. He's not ashamed about that at all. He's very proud of that. And so we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. This is Inside Pages on Metro Television. I'll share with you a contact number. Sorry, a WhatsApp line. Sorry, I should have done that from the very beginning of the show. It's 0244 097934. 0244 097934. That's the WhatsApp line for you out there. I know you want to share your thoughts on what you've heard so far. We're dealing with the Bank of Ghana issue where the minority and some civil society organizations say they want to picket at the central bank premises to get Dr. Ernest Adesing, the board of directors, and his deputies out of the place. And also looked at the Super Delegates conference. Professor Kobe Mensah has set the tone for what promises to be an interesting round of discussion on the MPP's internal elections. They've just done the first stage. The second stage is, some will say, is the real deal, but it depends on where you stand. Some say, well, nothing is going to change on November 4th. But see how it all plays out. Like we say, as far as we're here. Let me start with Mr. Kofi Tonto, and the reason I'll start with him is because of some of the things that Professor Kobe Mensah has said, and I'm interested to know whether he has any opinion to share or whether he disagrees with them. We're going to be doing this in 30 minutes, and so we'll see how it goes. Kofi, you've heard him. I don't know whether you want to respond to some of the things he said, or you have your own. You said that you don't agree. Sure, that's fine. Oh, sorry, your mic is off. Sorry.
There are a few things that Prof said that I would like to quickly rebut.
Right.
One being the impression that there was intimidation.
Okay.
That's absolutely not true. There was no intimidation anywhere on the voting day or the day before. None whatsoever. Look, there is a definition for free and fair elections. The Supreme Court has affirmed it. Yes, there are instances where we have issues in an election. But free and fair election is defined as when, or you can say that even if there are issues, the issues do not materially or substantially affect the election in a material way. Let anybody tell me that the few infractions that happened, we are yet to even go into the details of it to ascertain who was the antagonist and who was the protagonist. So, if I am going to vote and the law says I shouldn't lift my ballot, and the same law says even if I lift my ballot, there are people who are responsible for it. I lift my ballot and the person who is not responsible for it accosts me in a violent way and I react. How does that amount to intimidation?
Right.
So let's be careful in trying to create the impression that there was substantial or material effect that affected the outcome of the elections. No, none whatsoever. There were a few infractions here and there. The party has taken hold of it, investigating it, and will mete out the necessary punishment for those responsible.
Right.
So that is number one. So there was no intimidation before or during the election. There are people who are ministers of state who support other candidates. They are still doing their jobs. They are still following the candidate around. Peter Mewu is an example. Abna Sari is an example. Several other people who support other candidates. Even Kennedy Ohene Japan is still a board member at one of the most prestigious places in government. He's still doing his job. So why the impression that somebody is being intimidated? And then Prof also said heavy use of resources. Heavy use of what resources? I was hoping that Prof would go into detail of what the usage and what the resources were. A party conducted an election. People went and voted. Where is the heavy use of resources? I've said it here, that by the vice president being a vice president, yes, there are certain things that benefits that accrue to him. For example, state security, protection, travel, etc. But he has even made a conscious effort that I am not going to abuse state resources.
Right.
So I'll do and take certain actions not to do that. So where from this argument of state resources? But you see, the whole point is this: to create the impression that one was an establishment candidate. First and foremost, when you even talk about establishment, do you look at both sides of the coin when it comes to establishment? Let's assume that being an establishment or quote unquote an incumbent candidate.
You mean has its own disadvantage?
Of course, and many. I mean, we are now in an economic challenge. Everybody is attacking the vice president for the economic challenge. Is the vice president not bearing the brunt for the challenges of this government? Why is nobody talking about the disadvantages of being in government? If you go out there, every challenge of the government is visited directly on the vice president, even including payment of arrears. I went to one constituency. They said, Kofi, they work for Forestry Commission. We are waiting for our arrears. Every challenge of the government is visited on the vice president. Why is nobody talking about that? Even things that he's not directly responsible for, he's being held accountable for it because he's a vice president. But somehow we are supposed to ignore all of that and just look at, quote unquote, some advantages of some establishments. Look, the vice president has worked, and deservingly so, and that is why he won. And then the impression being created that people will be coerced. Look at the special delegate system. Only 22 were government appointees. The remaining 275 constituency executives, 137 MPs, 80 diaspora, 27 party national executives, regional executives, past former executives. So which of them has a direct assignment to President Akufo-Addo for their job to be on the line, aside from the 21, which is 14 regional ministers and 7 substantive ministers, because not all ministers that voted. It was only 7 substantive ministers that voted and 14 regional ministers. So for me, I don't see the point. Now, I know time is fast spent, so let me wrap it up.
Right.
Bawumia joined the party, has contributed his bit to the party. So delegates, the super delegates rewarded him for service, for sacrifice, for loyalty, for inclusivity. He has served this party. He has sacrificed for this party.
Right.
He has been loyal to this party in these trying moments. Moro, people say that, Bawumia, go out there and tell people that you are not part of the challenges. Ken Ofori-Atta is not allowing you to work. People have said that. But he says that whether Ken Ofori-Atta is allowing me to work or not, that's one debate. But the bottom line is we are a collective government. And I cannot abandon
But
a
how
government.
how authentic is that hearsay in a way that
No, that's a debate we
the
can
finance
have.
minister didn't allow him to work? Because it's been speculated, highly
Okay,
speculated.
maybe Prof will know, but
Yeah.
media, that's a debate we can have.
It is clear.
Really?
Yes.
You
I'll
know that
speak
for a
to
fact?
It's clear that
It's clear that the finance minister has not allowed the vice president to
How do you know?
function.
do you have facts?
do you
Because
know that, though?
he's the head of the economic management team. You see,
Because you see, the more that narrative is pushed, then it comes, the
Moro.
question then comes up, then why didn't you resign?
Moro,
Because your personal integrity and reputation is at stake. Because who's
Yeah.
everything is being visited on the vice president, and somebody who has an ambition would say, "Look, I have an ambition. I want to lead this party in the not too distant future. It is either you allow me to work or I quit, because I'm not going to be there for. I'm not going to allow myself to be battered and lampooned and criticized and so on and so forth, when indeed I'm not the cause of the problem." That's what I'm saying. So I'm saying that if the narrative is put, and that's why Kofi Toto said it quite smartly.
It's quite
you heard what Kofi Toto said. He said, "Look,
unfortunate
some
that-
have said." You know what I mean?
It's quite unfortunate,
Right.
You know, it's quite unfortunate that those who actually speak to these issues,
Okay.
a lot of them say, "I do not want to be put on record." So they speak to you on the side.
Right.
What was the vice president's position
Exactly.
on e-levy?
Uh-huh.
What was the vice president's position on IMF?
Okay.
As opposed to the finance minister. If they will be truthful to you, they held two opposing views.
Okay.
And it baffles me to actually believe that indeed, most of the time, it is the finance minister's position that is carried.
Okay.
That is what
Is it-
surprises
is it
me.
Moro?
But
Moro,
whether or
is it-
not,
No, I'll bring you. Don't worry.
whether
I'll
or
bring
not
you.
he
I'll
should
bring
have
you.
Yes,
resigned
true.
is another thing.
It's another matter.
It is for him to have decided.
Okay, so you wanted to button because of what Kofitonto said that some have said.
So I was only buttressing.
That's
yeah,
fine.
so
That's fine.
that
Please go ahead.
discussion,
Okay.
if you leave it,
It will go on and on and on and on.
that's why I said it was just a passing comment.
That's fine.
Moro, you should have allowed me to.
Please
You
go
mean
ahead.
small,
No,
small heckling there?
no,
Yeah,
Small heckling as
please
it.
go
All
on.
right,
Go
please
ahead,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Please go ahead. No, you can come in. You can come in. You can come in.
Good. You see, the Baumia team,
Okay.
which my newfound friend is,
Mr. Kofitonto.
they are trying to run away
Oh, but I
from
haven't done
the
it.
economic challenges.
Right.
You see, oh, seriously.
But that's
you see,
contrary-
Your point is that if the economy was doing well, this matter will come up.
the economic results
Okay.
of the 7-year governance of Nana Baumia seems to be very bad.
Right.
So, strategically, his team are finding means to get away, say we have misunderstanding with Ofuriata. No, you are the head of the economic management team. For people like us, we are very surprised at the results. Though we knew that it won't go that well. But as we speak, you've revised your growth rate to 1.5%. And having an economist, Dr. Baumia, heading the economic management team, it doesn't add up. And we see him as an incompetent economist. A very incompetent economist, but the results are very bad. So what I will tell him, no matter how they run away from the results, we will bring the results, and Ghanaians know the results so far of the 7-year administration.
You see,
What
Moro.
you can do is to judge and see what will happen, but to run away is not possible.
But you see,
Your
Moro,
results have
actually,
not been-
I think my
If you can
senior
learn so
brother
that you
was
can-
not even listening to
Okay.
me. Because what I rather said
Yeah.
Some say.
was that some say that he should run from the problem.
Right.
But he has said that he's not going to run from
Yes,
the problem.
I made a
That's
general.
what I said.
I made a general comment. I'm not pinning. I said
Oh, okay.
as part of his campaign.
No, but it's not our campaign. I'm part of the campaign. And I am saying that I speak for the man. And I'm saying that we are not, you see, let's even assume that finance minister is the one doing everything.
Right.
Ghanaians voted for Akufo-Addo and the men that he is using. Whether you are a CEO, whether you are an MP, or I'm sorry, not MP minister or a minister proper, whatever, you are part of the government. So you cannot be seen to be running away from the problem. And that is the point that I'm making.
Okay.
That the vice president is not going to run away from the problem, because that would be absolutely unfair to the Ghanaian people.
Right.
What we rather should do is to confront the issues head on, admit where we are wrong, explain where we have to provide explanation, and the most important thing, tell Ghanaians what we are going to do to ameliorate the challenges.
Right.
And that is what we are going to do. So I'm saying that the super delegates
Right.
looked at all of that, because we've seen some candidates who have abandoned the ship
Right.
and said, no, we are out. But the super delegates are saying that, do you know what? The people who have a pact with Ghanaians is not necessarily Akufo-Addo. It is us, the delegates. Because it was we that went to Ghanaians and said, you are looking for a leader. Oh, we have a leader for you. His name is Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. So if there are challenges, and if Ghanaians are going to hold anybody accountable, it is the MPP and Akufo-Addo.
All right.
So if you run away from the problems, you are running from the delegates.
Okay.
And the delegates appreciate that, no, Bawumia has stuck with us through thick and thin. Esumo, Ewiamu, he's with us, and we are going to reward him for it. So service, sacrifice, loyalty, inclusivity. And that is why they voted for him.
Now, what do you make of the results?
Well, thank you. I had two surprises because I had 5 people I predicted were going to be there. Unfortunately, I got disappointed by Jogate, who had campaigned for over 3 years.
Let's think that it's not his first time.
Yes, I was quite surprised. In fact, I placed him 4th. To have realized that he wasn't going to be part at all was a surprise. I wasn't expecting Dr. Akutu to be part, and surprisingly, he is part. Perhaps the delegates bought into his ideas, and they included him. The first 3, and I do not hide my biases. I stand with Ken for varied reasons. Dr. Bawumia, a fine gentleman of all standards, yes, knowledgeable. Alan, of course, another fine gentleman. But then comes what we now call the Ghana's Donald Trump. Like him or hate him, we can speak all the theory. We can think globally and act locally. Ken will tell you, this is what I want to do practically. We can use salt, we can use cassava, and he tells you how. He's not just saying, I will do, but how it will be done. And will you be surprised that he is the only individual in the NPP who leaves his constituency to go and campaign for other people in their constituencies? True. And these are real facts that he sponsored from his own resources to have campaigned for 17 individuals, out of which 16 won. At a time when he bought a plant for Tamale Teaching Hospital, he had no intention of becoming a flag bearer, not to talk of him becoming president of this country. See what he's done at 37. He's not the only philanthropist in this country, but if you look at what he's done, that's why I say, like him or hate him, he is a human being just like you and I. He's got his own downside of life. But when you look at the indiscipline in the country, when you look at performance, commitment to party, then the party people actually will want to tell you that he is somebody who can work for them and for the country. I wasn't surprised that he came second because people thought he was going to be third. He's going to cause a tsunami in November.
Really?
Yes. Trust you me, if they had voted once, I personally did not, though I don't have power.
They're not for this two-tier system.
Please. I did not support the two-tier system, right? If they had voted once, Ken would have won. Remember that what just happened was not about who was first, who was second. It was a selection process.
I agree. It was just a short list.
To have just selected 5 people.
Yes.
Somebody who understands the problem of the people, and he said, this is a solution. You know, in this country, we only talk about problems. But how the problems will be solved, only a few.
It seems we found where wanting.
Prefer solutions or suggestions that will help solve such problems. And he is one of those. I do not want to just try to project him as a person, though that is what I stand. I stand with him. I stand by him. There is a legitimate expectation that indeed, when we vote for people, this is what we want to see them do. And if the person says, this is what I'll do, and he finds that feasible, because there are things that we have even started without even having proper source of funding. And that has become a problem. So the rational choice theory will tell you that humans will always want to do things, to begin with, in their self-interest. There is an unseen hand. There is an actor, rational actor, who says that, look, there are some people, I have contested for election before, and somebody comes to me and said that, I did not vote for you because I knew that you were going to win. And that is why I didn't vote for you. People knew that he was going to be a part. And that's why perhaps they voted for other people. But trust you me, if they had gone once to have voted,
Ken would have caused an upset.
He would have caused a huge upset. And he's going to do that in November. See, people sometimes lose touch with the base. Wait until November. We'll come back to this studio on this same program and discuss. Because we never thought that indeed he was going to get the number of votes he did.
That's true.
But he did. And people on the ground, there are those who do not become, they are not necessarily partisan. And they tell you, I want to vote for Ken. But, you know, I have not met Ken before.
Never.
You can call him. If he is listening or anybody close to him, I have never met him before. Not even those around him have I spoken with. But there are people on the street who say that, but for his anger, his temperament, if Ken hears me this morning, he needs to employ somebody to just get close to him 24/7. Just to control anger.
That is manage him.
Just to manage him. That is the only thing. Apart from the temperament, trust you me, he is so practical that he will be a president Ghanaians will yearn for.
I see.
And that a day will come. Look, somebody may have become, may have had in a lot of votes.
Yeah.
Check from the records. There's this chief, he's late though, Odenehu Japan Abebio.
Okay.
He contested for Western Regional House of Chiefs president and lost. He contested for national president, National House of Chiefs, and won. So it does not matter who became first, who became second. The dynamics are going to change from 1,000, a little over 1,000 to 200,000. Those who have benefited from certain individuals, those who agree with his ideas that this is the best way to go.
Okay.
Let's wait for November. November.
What an interesting
4th.
analysis of the
But please,
superintendent's
before we
comments.
go,
Yes.
that Bob Marley,
Yes.
in one of his favorite songs, he talks about natural mystic.
Right.
And he says, don't tell no lie. There is a natural mystic blowing through the air.
Yes.
Can't keep them down. If you listen carefully, now you will hear.
Let me read this quickly, and then I'll take 2 minutes from. I'll take 3 minutes from Mr. Henning, and then 2 minutes from Prof.
You didn't allow
And
me
then,
to participate
I
in
know.
this.
Can you imagine? They hijacked it. Let me just do this quickly before you come in. Jason sends a message. He says, "Why is Mr. Tunto presuming the point made by Professor Mensah with regards to heavy use of resources automatically and singularly refers to Dr. Bawumia? Can the point not be extrapolated to say that heavy use of resources occasioned the instance of Ken taking the second spot instead of Alan? Professor Mensah was talking to data, and the data cuts across, and his interpretation of the data should not be reduced to sentiment of Alan versus Bawumia." And then let me do this quickly. Good morning to you and your panelists. I think Governor Addison must himself resign by now. He was appointed by the president and cannot be independent to the point that Ghanaians should be quiet on his negligence. We're going for a loan of $3 billion from IMF. We sit here to throw away 60 billion cedis and still stay in office. We must be joking as people to allow him to stay in office. I vote to, MPP, but this is a no-no. Bank of Ghana should bow their head in shame. That's Thomas from Blakuma. I have lots of messages. I'm not sure I can read all. Mr. Seth Ohenefori.
Very clear within the MPP context that people are disappointed in leadership.
Okay.
Looking at the electoral college, Bawumia should have made more figures because most of the people voting, looking at their strengths, goes to his side as far as government is concerned. And with Ken's showing, shows that, look, the disappointment is going to the grassroots. And the November 4, there can be surprises, but I believe Dr. Bawumia will win at the end of the day. But then it shows that lack of trust in Bawumia's leadership and a sort of disappointment from his side, looking at the leadership. And I think the conflict which my colleague said are infractions, I think is something that you should look at as a political party. Our democracy have gone far. We don't have to allow, like what happened in Northeast, where I think one guy, the eyes, I think Alan Tremantes. Yeah, it's something that, and also the use of money. People like Hobson Adoye were accusing the chief of staff of putting in more money. It doesn't speak well for our democracy, and I think we should look at it. But I believe Dr. Bawumia will emerge November 7, but he's the candidate that we can easily beat, looking at his economic record.
We've heard you. Let me go to Professor Mensah. Professor Mensah, final thoughts, 1 minute.
Thank you. I think that Kofi made a very great, useful presentation, especially from his position. If I was a strategist in Bawumia campaign, exactly what I would do. But you shouldn't forget the accusation of the vice president that he's not performed is a reality. And he had run away from that in terms of his platform is also a reality. There is nowhere that the vice president had been seen admitting that he was solely recruited to come and perform economic magic. The president says that, not my words. He had failed, and he had failed to admit that he has failed. He keeps talking about digitalization. His team keeps saying that, digitalization could actually lead to our economic empowerment. Why was that variable not in the framework in the first place? Somebody must actually ask that question. When he was doing the Baumia series, we never heard digitalization in his speech. They should point it out to me. I'm analyzing his speeches throughout for a certain study, post-truth that I'm doing. There is no way that the vice president in his framework talked about digitalization. Today, he says that digitalization is what will give us that economic empowerment. He said that long ago about a certain framework that will give us economic empowerment. It didn't pan out, and he's run away from that platform. So he shouldn't actually say that they haven't run away. They have.
Okay.
And he had not admitted to Ghanaian people. And that's why I think that
All right.
his leadership of this country can never be possible, because he had failed in what he said was a strong suit. And we're not going to tolerate that.
All right. My resource persons have expressed their opinion. They're entitled to it, and so we respect it. We want to thank them very much for making time to join us on another edition of Inside Pages. Inside Pages is the place to be, Saturdays from 8 to 10. My name is Aldo Moro. Jesus, my champ, what's the name? Osei, Abdallah, Derek. Thank you very much for doing such a wonderful job with the production. I also want to thank Dr. Benjamin Ocher Ankra, lecturer, Central University, and also a governance analyst, for joining us. From time to time, you see him as and when he's available. I'll make sure he comes here. And also, Mr. Seth Ofori Ohene is also a member of the NDC's communications team. So is Mr. Kofi Tontusun, will be a doctor, is a proud associate of Dr. Mahmoud Bamia. He believes in the Dr. Mahmoud Bamia vision and his message. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.